This is Dateline News and Conversation. Tonight, a very important topic, hardly talked about, Nazism and the unification of Europe. This is part one with my friend and my co-host tonight, my guest, Professor Maria Nikolakaki. Maria, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Regis. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be on your shows. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. You've been very prolific, writing a lot of articles on your Substack channel, but one of the latest ones was about Nazism and the unification of Europe. It was a very long article, and we're going to have to break it into two parts. Tonight is part one. Next week, early next week, I forget the date right now, but we'll do part two. So let's start with this. You used a phrase, the new order of things, quote unquote, that Nazism wanted to impose on Europe. Maria, what were you talking about?
Well, actually, Hitler's plan was a new world order. And it was about conquering Europe at first plan, and having the Aryan race rule Europe and then the whole world. So if it rings any bells to today's conditions and the new world order, and also I would add how many of those who are in power in the EU, but also in globalist institutions, are also descendants of Nazis, like von der Leyen or Klaus Schwab and many others who are the leaders of the globalist cabal, have roots ideologically and through relations to Nazism. And that is something that we must have in mind. And that is something that I want to unfold to compare with today's conditions that I see very apparent.
Yeah, well, I was surprised to read that it's no surprise that Hitler wanted to really expand his empire. And we'll talk about this in more detail. Several of today's European Union unelected leaders are descendants of Nazi parents. You mentioned Ursula von der Leyen. There's been a lot of articles written about her now and pictures showing her mother, for example.
And her grandmother.
Yeah, and her grandmother. But 1941 to 1945, World War II, or as the Russians call it, the Great Patriotic War. Let's talk about that for a minute. I want to say right up front, most of us thought that was the end of the Nazi ideology when the Soviet Red Army finally defeated the German Nazi Wehrmacht. Let's talk a little bit now about the price that people paid, not only in the Soviet Union, Maria, but across Europe. None compare to the 27 plus million Soviets who died. Tell me a little bit more about the growth of Nazism and that the Nazi ideology really was not exterminated at the end of World War II.
First of all, I would like to remind some lines from Brecht. He said, "Do not rejoice that you have killed the monster, the whore that bore it is in orgasm again. So despite the victory of the Red Army over the Nazis, and of course there was allies, but don't forget that both Britain and USA were very ambivalent in the beginning if they wanted to join, and if they joined, what side they would be in. It wasn't clear because they, let's say, American capitalists actually funded both sides. And that is something indisputable. So we have Rockefeller giving the Nazi army oil, we have Coca-Cola, we have other companies like Ford, we have Bosch, we have many Western companies funding the whole war machine. And I think at this point, I think we need to make some distinctions between fascism and Nazism. And fascism is the ideology that the capitalists use when they are in crisis. So it's capitalism on steroids, as many quote. What does that mean? That means that if you want, when the ruling class is in danger, then they create the basis for fascism. So the working class is consumed by this ideology. They are enforced to put community ideas first. If that rings any bells with what we had during the pandemic years, you know, community first and not individual rights first. And then we have the condition that this suppression is targeted against minority groups. So instead of capitalists to be blamed, we have the Jews, the communists, the blacks, the migrants, everyone is to be blamed. That's a fascist ideology. Now, Nazism is more militarily and is concentrated in negative, violent acts against these minority groups. So it's an escalation, actually, of fascism. These two ideologies are very much interconnected. So what we saw is that during the Second World War, the targets had been Jews, Slavs, which I don't see many mentioning, because the second biggest group targeted were the Slavs. And then we have communism. So we have a combination of Slavs and communists, and that was why USSR was targeted. Or we could also see it the other way. They targeted Slavs and communists in order to attack USSR. USSR has always been, Russia has always been the biggest country on the planet with the most rich resources. So it was very obvious that American capitalists would pay for the German military machine in order to attack these communists of USSR, Slavs and communists. So we have this condition where during the Second World War, it was like 27 million out of 60 million, both sides, that Russia paid as a sacrifice. Now, when we say 27 million, 2 generations, 3 generations ago, you can understand that today it could be more than 100 million Russians missing from its population due to that sacrifice during World War II. So we must think of Ernest Hemingway, who said, any democracy-loving person on this planet owes an eternal gratitude to the Red Army. We see during that time that something that most people do not know, that one of the second countries who had the biggest proportion of death in population is Greece. Greece lost about 10% of its population during World War II. It's about 8 to 11%. But what happened is that most of these deaths were due to a famine that the Germans introduced to the whole population. So during World War II, general famine and death and destruction happened to Greece. Hitler also took the gold of Greece. It took all its money. And although they signed an agreement that the gold would be paid and returned, of course, contemporary Germany has not only denied Greece's rights, but they also put a very strict memorandum that destroyed its population. Now, USA and UK had about 400,000 deaths, more or less. During that time, though, we must understand that the only country that benefited from World War II was USA. How so? It was because because it was away from Europe, and during World War II, it made all its industry into producing war tools and planes and guns and everything. So what happened during that time was that it was lend-leasing to its allies, just like it's doing to Ukraine right now. So what happened is that at the end of World War II, USA was found with 70% of the global gold and 50% of the global manufacturing industry, because at that point, all of Europe was into rubles. So what we need to understand is that World War II was an attempt to overthrow the Bolsheviks in the USSR, and for the West, that was represented through Hitler, to take over. Of course, it failed. The Russians, once more in their history, it wasn't the first time, and as we see, it's not the last. But they were brave. It took them a very big price, but they were able to return and put the USSR flag into Reichstag.
Okay. You know very well that May 9th in Russia now is called Victory Day. It's celebrated with a military parade every year, which I have seen many times in videos. I actually marched in the March of the Immortal Regiment, which follows the Victory Day parade, where over 1 million people marched through Moscow and then through Red Square, carrying portraits of their family members who served, and some died, many died in World War II. It's a very emotional day, very important day for modern day Russia. But in your article, I learned that May 9th also is significant because in 1950 it was called Europe Day. There was a proclamation for the creation of a European Federation. Maria, what was that all about? And did
Actually,
that morph into what we have today, the European Union?
actually, what happened was that the idea of federalization appeared in 1950 by Robert Schuman, but it was only in 1997 when the European Union, in order to take away the attention from Russia's V-Day, Victory Day against the fascists, it should be a global day celebrating the end of Nazism. And it was then that at the same day, they thought it would be a good idea to call it European Day. I want to I want to make some connections to today with what is going on with the federalization of Europe. What we have these elections coming next month, so we won't elect anything except members of the European Parliament, which is has no decisive role, but its only role is to be advisory, and it could be neglected and refuted at any time. So what they want to do right now is take down van der Leyen, who is also accused with corruption. She was accused for corruption when she was Ministry of Defense in Germany, and now she's big. It's all about the Pfizer gate and the billions of vaccines that she bought. She bought more than 10 billion vaccines. It was like 11 vaccines, 10 or 11 vaccines for all the European people, and that was paid by European money. And of course, we know that she is very friendly with Burla, and that her husband has a pharmaceutical that is also connected with Pfizer. So we have this money grab from European Union, and they suppose that van der Leyen will be taken down. The most serious candidate to replace van der Leyen is Mario Draghi. Mario Draghi was the director, the head of the ECB, and an ex director of Goldman Sachs, I think. Now, his plan is for federalization of Europe. And the question is, that means that all the countries that are part of the European Union would surrender their national sovereignty, and this unelected European Commission would be the government of the whole of Europe. Now, that is the Fourth Reich, as dreamed of by Hitler. So it must be it must ring some bells to people and see the scam that is going on, how this non-democratic, authoritarian, a tool of US imperialism, who is working against the interests of the people of Europe, is going to take control over all the European nations. I also want to add one more thing as a Greek. I must add that what Hitler could not succeed with the Greek people, Merkel's Germany was able to achieve through the memorandums that were created on the base of four economics that indebted Greece. It took over all its public property for 99 years, and it took over all the taxpayers' money. It's not the Greek state that collects the taxpayers' money. It is a troika construction with 5 members, 3 which are not Greek and 2 which are Greek, but even the Minister of Finance cannot overrule the decisions of this how it's called. So we say that the Fourth Reich was created through banks this time and not tanks. And Hitler sometimes could seem as barbaric, but we must overcover the cloak of liberalism that EU is pretending to have, while for the interests of the globalist elite that control it, and in expense of the European people and nations across Europe.
Wow. You mentioned the globalists. They're the ones that have been behind all of this. I think now it's becoming clear to many more people that their goal has always been world domination. And when we look around the world, in the United States, which is a capitalist country on steroids, predator capitalism, has become a fascist state. The connection between, as Mussolini said, the connection between capital and the state is fascism. And they are depriving Americans of all of their individual rights and freedoms, as we can see today. And there are many other examples of it, not just how they are putting down the campus protest against the Israeli genocide in Palestine, but we can see it in the deprivation of individual rights of many individuals who go against the official narrative. And Maria, we can see it across the European Union. From one end of Europe to the other, we're seeing fascist behavior. The way the state, the European Union, has taken control. You articulated that very brilliantly. You mentioned something else in your article that I think was very important, but I didn't completely understand. You said that today's European Union developed from the European coal and steel community. I couldn't relate to that at all. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, it's like the boiling frog, right? So after World War II, Germany could not actually have a decisive role again. So it started with, okay, let's have an energy and steel and coal European committee to exchange our potentials so that we can strengthen our economy. And but then you see other Nazis who were under Hitler's reign also were installed in what later became the European Union. So we have Alexander Dolizet, who was an ex-SS member. We have Ribbentrop, who which was a Nazi, and we have Walter Hallstein, who was made the leader of the first European Commission. So anyone who thinks that Nuremberg trials actually ended Nazism is deluded. Not only they were not made to pay, we saw also that Germany did not pay back reparations to the damaged countries except Israel. Greece has not, with 10% of its population decimated, did not get anything back. And we have this great Greek politician, activist, Manolis Glezos, who wrote this book. He was the one who took down the Nazi flag out of Acropolis, the first days that the Nazis came to Greece. And he wrote this book that even if it is one Deutsche Mark. So he wrote all these arguments about how they destroyed the economy and got away with it, and they came back to punish us. And Manolis Glezos, who was a politician till the end of his life for the left, he was a series of parliament member, and then he became a European parliament member for Syriza. He lived through all this death and destruction of World War II. He said that one of the reasons that Schäuble actually wanted to punish Greece was because of the fact that Greece resisted so hard that it had won the Italian army, and then Hitler was obliged to come down to Greece and fight the Greek resistance back, and that delayed him, and he went to USSR with a delay, and he fell into winter, so that's why he was also devastated. So the German Nazis actually hated Greeks for their resistance that actually calculated into delaying their arrival into the USSR. But the point that we need to see is that all these Nazis were not only put in places of power in EU, which is run with a liberal cloak, but also in United States of America. Through the Operation Paperclip, that was a CIA, it was a mother company. I can't remember how it's OEC, I think, something like that. What was constructed later and became CIA. More than 1,600 Nazi scientists undercover left Germany and were installed into all these scientific and political organizations like NASA, And we have the whole rocket program of the Nazis coming back. We have the eugenics program of vaccinations come back to USA. Now, we also have all these, the CIA was also filled with Nazis. The deep state was founded also by Nazi scientists that came from Germany. The rocket program and the nuclear bomb also that was fulfilled later on, but it was a continuation of that rocket program, was a continuation of the collaboration with Nazis. So we have a big continuation of Nazism under other cloaks. I did not want to say that the nuclear bomb was made by Nazis. I said the program continued with Nazis.
Maria, a couple of thoughts. You mentioned Operation Paperclip, where some 1,600 Nazis escaped Nuremberg because the OSC and what became the CIA under Allen Dulles brought them to America, placed them in very high positions in the government and in NASA. Wernher von Braun and his entire rocket team was brought to America. And I want to mention this particular quote. It was Hitler's liaison to von Braun and the rocket team who said this at a United States missile conference in the late 1950s. And he said this: "We lost 2 world wars, and I did not come to America to lose the next war." And this Nazi ideology has embedded itself throughout all layers of the United States government. But Maria, that's not the end of the story. You mentioned the whore that gave birth to Nazism is now having an orgasm, because we're seeing the rebirth of Nazism all over Europe and in Canada. After World War II, again, the CIA was involved in this, and they set up sleeper cells in Ukraine, in France, in Italy, and other countries that had a pro-Soviet or communist influence, even communist parties. These sleeper cells were funded and managed by the CIA. And the CIA has been operating in Ukraine with the successors of Stepan Bandera. Let's talk about that just for a little bit. Who fought with the Nazis, the Wehrmacht, and murdered millions of people, including Poles. And these sleeper cells have never been exterminated. Maria, let's talk a little bit about that.
As I said before, Nazism is something that the ruling class creates. It's not as much as, on contrary to what most people believe, it's not a bottom-up creation, it's a top-down creation. Sorry. So whenever the ruling class wants to achieve something, it just makes the people into its own military. That's a way of to understand how Nazism is created. It's through indoctrination, it's through false ideals, and it's also through motivations, through construction of a common enemy. So we see that CIA always wanted to destroy USSR and to take over its resources, which means that they fed on Ukrainian Nazism, and it was promoted in every possible way. We see now that in Ukraine was never denazified, and I think this is something that Stalin did not take serious, because the Red Army won over the World War. It didn't mean that those who aligned with Nazis changed their ideals. And we have not only Ukraine, we also have what Pepe Escobar calls the Baltic Chihuahuas. We also have Poland, who collaborated with the Nazis. We also have Finland, who also collaborated with the Nazis, Sweden. So all these countries that hated USSR kept undercover a form of Nazism. And that is something that CIA and the American establishment nurtured through various means. And that is what we see right now, that although most of the people of Ukraine recognize Russia as a brother, a sister state, there are hubs that collided with Bandera, who pushed the idea of Ukrainian supremacy. So Ukrainians are like, they identify as the Aryan race, that they descend from ancient origins, and this fabrication of a history that does not exist, but people are fed with that in order to hate the other, feel superior, and pit one nation against the other. And in this position, we can see how pitting Slavs against Slavs was a dream come true for many Hitlerites.
It has always been the goal for European imperial countries. I think you could go back to Finland, Sweden, but certainly France, the Napoleonic Wars. It was all about taking over Russia, controlling this vast landmass, as you talked about, and these vast natural resources, which the rest of the world has always envied and prized. And then you have Hitler, the same thing. He wanted to break up the Soviet Union, break up Russia, steal its resources, gas and oil, gold. And now we have, and I believe since 1945 at least, the goal, as it always has been, but the goal of the United States has been to balkanize, break up Russia, and steal its resources ever since 1945. Today, it is the stated policy of the United States to effect a devastating attack on Russia, to defeat it. This is the stated policy and goals of the United States of America and its vassals in the EU and in NATO. And I think it's very important to make these connections that we're talking about tonight. Nazism as an ideology is alive and well. And I have to ask you this, Maria. What can be done? Now, we're going to continue this discussion in part 2 next week, but is there any hope to break free of this evil grasp and control of this ideology on humanity? Do you see that there's any hope?
Well, I've been an anti-fascist activist for a long, long time in Greece since Golden Dawn arose to power and became a member of the parliament. Later on, I was on the anti-fascist terrain, and I was giving speeches not only in US, in UK, and in other countries. So the point where I see the possibility of things turning around, I think is first of all, we must tell all these people who might be very tending to get aligned with Nazism, that the only interests that they serve are the masters, because that's what Nazism is. It's blind obedience to the head of Nazism. It is not democratic. I mean, Nazis, of course, hate democracy. It's not human, and it's not progress. It's death, hate, destruction. Humanity should have taken the lessons from World War II. Europe and was devastated. 60 million dead. And instead of that, people get into this, lesser evil kind of condition and end up being totally evil. Now, after my political, let's say, challenges that I faced, I think the only thing that can bring harmony into this world is community living. We do not want all these ideologies of left, right, ultra left. It's like divide and conquer coming from the bourgeois. So a representative democracy is a democracy, quote unquote, fit and suited for the ruling class, not for the people. We make each other our enemy when we could actually work together and agree on most of the challenges that this world presents. So my idea is that as a Greek also, because Greeks from ancient Greek time till the first Bavarian king, Othon, came to Greece and was installed, was working through Greek communities and philosophy of prosopo, of faith, which is we need each other to exist. If you don't exist, I don't exist, and if I don't exist, you don't exist. We have to be in solidarity. We lose in solidarity when we are alone. We can work together to make progress. That is the only form, I believe, of progress that fits into human needs and desires. It could be, I have made some ideas of how it could be organized in order to have bigger goals achieved. This is the work that I've been doing the last couple of years. So I do believe that we can fight Nazism and fascism, but we need to change our connection, the way that we connect, and from hate we go to love. And when I say love, this is the highest ever emotion people can feel. The lowest actually emotion is not hate, it's actually fear. So they manipulate us, they turn us into fear, and we mobilize, and then we turn against each other, and then we go to hate. So, but love actually, which if you see, that's why all religions across the world preach love, because it is a higher connection towards the other. You are it enclosures empathy, it enclosures surrendering your ego. It also has protection, it has generosity, it has many other emotions that are connected. So what I think that the only way to fight Nazism is on a broader scale. I mean, in order to win it long term and not short term over now, because we saw what happened with World War II. We are seeing Ukrainian Nazis all over the place, and then they are infiltrating Europe too. The only way is to change our set of mind and struggle for direct democracy, not representative democracy, where the bourgeoisie comes in and decides for us and approves who is to be elected, who can be elected. So they are selected before, and we go home and feel happy that we voted, and so everything, we did our duty. The system is rigged. People should understand that Nazism is not a co-side of capitalism. It's actually a brother of capitalism. As I said, whenever capitalists feel endangered that they will lose their power, they turn into Nazism. And so we cannot escape our way, or turn away our eyes and think that if we don't look at what is going on, it will go away, and we will someday wake up and someone else will have taken the responsibility of removing it. And the only thing that I say is that the only way out is cooperatism, local society, communities, solidarity, and love. Regis, I got a thing that I'm out of battery, so I don't know if I can stay with you a lot longer.
Well, we'll attempt to wrap this up, Maria, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. small communities, not representative democracy, but real people democracy. Our friend Blas Kauchik has written a book about this. It's one of the basic principles. And I think today we're seeing a movement towards a multipolar world, the BRICS. President Xi and President Putin are finishing a meeting in China where they have stated to the world a different new order that's based on the sovereignty and respect of all nations, cooperation, development, and the respect for all peoples, and a strict observance of international law and the UN Charter. Now, we'll continue this discussion next week, but one of our guests from Canada, Richard French, had a question for you, and I posted it. He'd like to get your thoughts on moving to Mexico.
I love Mexico. I've been there 3 times. I've collaborated with John Holloway at the Puebla University. I will never forget the colors, the tastes, the people. I mean, the world is a wonderful place to be, and I love all the people around the world.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've traveled pretty extensively in my lifetime, and I have found that we're all pretty much the same, and we want the same things for ourselves, for our families, for our children, for security, and for prosperity. And this is what I think we have to fight for. And I'd like to believe that this is what the New World Order envisioned by President Putin, President Xi, and the BRICS movement is really all about. Maria, thank you so much. We'll look forward to doing this again next week.
Always a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.